They fought over coronavirus in their final debate. Donald Trump defends his handling of the pandemic, but Joe Biden warns of dark days ahead. So how's COVID-19 shaping the presidential race in the US? And is either candidate convincing? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Hashem Ahelbarra. US President Donald Trump and Democratic Party nominee Joe Biden have held their second and final debate less than 2 weeks before the election. The threat of having their microphones muted largely deterred interruptions, making for a less chaotic event than the first. They still sparred about the coronavirus response, racism in America, and accused each other of corruption. We'll bring in our panel of guests to discuss this further. But first, this report from our White House correspondent, Kimberly Harkett.
It was a stark contrast from the first debate. Fewer interruptions and more substantive discussion with the two presidential hopefuls, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, who mostly respected the rules. The moderator even earned a rare compliment from the U.S. president.
So far, I respect very much the way you're handling this.
The debate opened with a disagreement over the handling of the COVID pandemic that's left more than 223,000 people dead in the United States.
We're learning to live with it. We have no choice. We can't lock ourselves up in a basement like Joe does.
We're learning to live with it. People are learning to die with it.
Trump insists a vaccine is just weeks away, even as most scientists suggest it could be months, and infections in the United States are surging. Trump lashed back, suggesting Biden's policies to lock down the country are draconian and would hurt families and small businesses. Trump and Biden also took aim at the respective alleged foreign entanglements. Trump hitting Biden on his son's business dealings with Ukraine and China, and whether Biden put policies in place as vice president that helped his son profit.
I have not taken a penny from any foreign source ever in my life. We learned that this president paid 50 times the tax in China, has a secret bank account with China.
Biden lashed back, accusing Trump of cozy relationships with Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. It's a relationship Trump defended, claiming it's prevented conflict and tensions he inherited from the Obama White House.
It was a very dangerous period in my first 3 months before we sort of worked things out a little bit.
Okay.
There was a they left us a mess.
What has he done? He's legitimized North Korea. He's talked about his good buddy, who's a thug. That's like saying we had a good relationship with Hitler before he, in fact, invaded.
On domestic policy, Trump tried repeatedly to portray Biden's policies as extreme and too little too late, considering his years in government. He alleged a Biden presidency would bring the United States closer to socialism when it comes to health care.
President Trump, he was there for 47 years. He didn't do it.
As America continues to grapple with the issue of racial injustice, Trump attacked Biden for his role in passing a 1994 crime bill that locked up a disproportionate number of African Americans for possessing a small amount of drugs.
He never did a thing except in 1994 when he did such harm to the black community. And they were called, and he called them, super predators.
All 100 senators voted for it. A bill on drugs and how to deal with drugs. It was a mistake.
On climate change, Trump defended his decision to withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Accord, stating he believed it was too costly for small business. But when Biden suggested the U.S. should move away from an economy based on oil, Trump had this response.
Oh,
I will
that's
transition.
A big statement. Because basically what he's saying is he is going to destroy the oil industry.
The final presidential debate was supposed to be about policy, and that is exactly what American voters got. But with 47 million ballots already cast, there's little time for either candidate to win new voters. Kimberly Helkin, Al Jazeera, Nashville, Tennessee.
Joining us are our guests in Washington, D.C., Adolfo Franco, a Republican strategist, is also former advisor to Senator John McCain. In Salt Lake City, Utah, Rick Wilson, co-founder of the Lincoln Project and author of Everything Trump Touches Dies. In Asheville, Clark Plexico, former North Carolina State Democrat senator and elected delegate to the National Democratic Convention. Welcome all to the program. Adolfo, as a Republican, I think the general mood yesterday was this was going to be a game changer for Trump. In other way, this could be his last chance. Do you think this was a wasted opportunity?
Well, I don't think it was a wasted opportunity. I was happy to see that there was an opportunity to have a contrast between the two candidates. For most, we can certainly delve into the details here and go back and forth on the points that were discussed during the debate. But generally, for the American people and the voters, it's just you asking about it being a game changer. It's an impression that is left. And for my take on the impression is, at the end of the evening, you have, again, Donald Trump is a non-politician, an outsider with results. Mm-hmm. That's what he was projecting. The other side, Joe Biden, is a person who's been in Washington for nearly 50 years in key positions in government, an insider, part of Washington, and whether the American people still want to continue with that course of action without, frankly, results. Mm-hmm. And I'd say this just very quickly. Bob Gates, who was the Secretary of Defense for Vice President Biden and President Obama, said that in his book, and he's reaffirmed it, that Joe Biden was wrong on every decision in his entire career. So you had a candidate, and I think Trump hit him hard on this, saying, I'm going to do the following things. Okay. Why haven't you done it? And that's what I think the impression of the American people.
think in the next 12 days will be crucial for Americans to see and whether they will agree with that particular characterization. Rick, do you think that Trump can still change the trajectory of the race?
I think it's very late in the game. I think last night Donald Trump needed a knockout blow against Joe Biden, and he didn't get it. Joe Biden just needed to survive the fight, and he did. The idea that Donald Trump can change himself as a person is something that we've as Americans learned is not a possibility. Mm-hmm. We've also learned that the vectors of this campaign in swing states are moving away from Donald Trump, not toward him. Right now he's tied in Texas. Right now he's beginning to lose ground in Kansas. He's still ahead, but he's losing ground in Kansas, one of the most red states in the country. So, without some shocking development in the campaign right now, Americans are exhausted by the incompetence of Trump, the malfeasance of Trump, and they're looking at a different set of choices on November 3rd. And I think it's very difficult to change the game at this point.
Okay. Clark, the handling of the pandemic was a key issue during the debate and throughout the campaign. Do you think that Biden's aggressive federal action, and when he was talking about the dark winter ahead, this could be playing to his advantage in the coming days?
Oh, absolutely. I think Biden made a great statement when he said, I want to shut down the virus. I don't want to shut down the country. And the ultimate insider in Washington is the president of the United States. Donald Trump is the president of the United States. So what has happened in COVID-19, in the pandemic, ultimately, responsibility is Donald Trump. You cannot walk away from the fact that 220 million people have died, 40,000 are in hospitals today, and 1,000 people are dying every single day. Donald Trump had to do two things last night. He had to show the American people that he had a plan to deal with the pandemic, which he did not. And the other thing was he had to hope that Joe Biden would fall on his face. Joe Biden is sitting on a lead, but he didn't sit on that lead last night. He went on the attack. And he showed the American people basically the change here that is wanted is someone with a direction to decide what to do with the pandemic, how to handle global warming, how to deal with the racial issues, and a plan and a vision for the future. And that's what he did last night.
Adolfo, when you have in some surveys 70% of the voters saying that healthcare is going to be an important thing for them, and compounded with the outbreak of COVID-19, Trump comes to the podium and says that he is determined to axe Obamacare. Do you think this was a misstep at this critical moment?
Well, let me just respond by saying that the most important thing remains in terms of the polls, the economy, and as it always been, it always remains that. And the latest Gallup poll out yesterday showed the president's approval rating and preferences for him handling the economy rose 1 point to now 57%. Now, Obamacare has been something that I don't know about Rick in the past, although he was not a Trump supporter, but certainly the Republican Party as a whole has been against Obamacare almost unanimously from the beginning of 2010. We want to replace Obamacare and, in a sense, perfect it. So I think that message came through. I just want to make a couple of observations, if I could quickly. 220 million Americans have not died. It's 220,000 in the first instance. Secondly, is the president's point, it's always hard to prove a negative, the planes landing and so forth. The president made a very good point. Had his actions, which were criticized by the former vice president, not taken prudently and quickly against the advice of Dr. Fauci and others, for example, shutting entry from China, the death toll would have been much higher. Those are Dr. Fauci's words. So obviously this is a global pandemic. Lastly, the mortality rate in this country, which nobody wants to talk about, is going down, and it's far lower than most European countries. So the president has handled the pandemic. Two quick things. When a candidate talks about darkness, which is what Joe Biden is talking, and negativity, that usually doesn't play well. President Trump is talking about optimism. I started in Washington as a Reagan person in the 1970s, and he was always about optimism. The president is optimistic, and that is the president's role. And the president has handled the coronavirus very quickly. The only gaffe last night was about fracking and oil. Rick talks about we'll see how Kansas votes and how Texas votes. I think that was a major mistake by the vice president on the energy issues. I think it's going to cost him in Pennsylvania. It's going to cost him in key states, Ohio included, just on that statement alone.
Rick, Adolfo is saying basically that the handling of the COVID-19 was exemplar, was terrific by the president.
Well, the American people have already made up their minds about the president's handling of COVID, and in every survey, they view his handling as a disaster. There are 220,000 Americans who have died because of COVID, and if we had the same death rate as Germany, where there was a competent leadership that directed people early in the process to behave, if they didn't have someone like Donald Trump who lied to Americans for 3 months, knowing what he knew about this virus, lied to Americans for 3 months about its severity and about the impact of it, we would have a different outcome. There'd probably be 50,000 fewer dead Americans. Now, I will say this, and the polling judgment is quite clear. It's abundantly clear. The fact that Donald Trump is having to try to compete in states that he won last time, like Texas and Kansas now, of all places, is a disaster for this president. It's also another thing that was mentioned that, when people are talking about darkness, it doesn't work well. Donald Trump is a fundamentally pessimistic candidate. He's always talking about people coming to kill you, the caravans, MS-13, Antifa, all these imagined villains in his head that he's always portraying as this immediate threat. They're coming to your suburbs to destroy them, etc. This is a guy who's primarily a recursive, dark, pessimistic message. And I think that shows through very often. But again, last night, Donald Trump needed a knockout. He didn't get it.
Clark, these are extraordinary times in the US. And Biden yesterday hinting that if the Supreme Court were to scrap the Affordable Care Act, he will go ahead and own it as Biden Care. Is this something that could be another tough moment for Biden if the Supreme Court decides to axe the Affordable Care Act?
I think it'd be a tough moment for the American people if that happens. I think what Joe Biden has said regarding the court is that obviously if you're looking at the politics that have been played, look at what Mitch McConnell, the Republicans have done under the leadership of Donald Trump, completely different than what they did 4 years ago when President Obama had announced his candidate. That was not taken up. This time they're rushing through someone. And the idea is that if you go back to the Constitution, there's nothing in the Constitution that says we have to have 9 justices. That is just a historical development. We've had 6, we've had 5, we've had 9. And so it's legitimate to say, let's have a nonpartisan or bipartisan group look at that issue and decide if this is the best way to go forward or not. He's made no commitment other than that. But on the Obamacare, what Joe Biden has said is that is a first step. It's a first step toward more health care for more people. And the American people deserve that. And that's who Joe Biden was talking to last night. He looked directly in the camera and he said that to them. And I think that will resonate.
Adolfo, you said that the economy was Trump's strength, but he's trailing behind in states who won easily in 2016. Don't you see this as an indication that people are looking forward to turn the chapter of Donald Trump?
Well, all this stuff about trailing and we're behind, and it's news to me. I'm on the campaign that we're competing in Texas and in Kansas, and we're frightened about these things. Of course, this program could have been a program that we could be having 4 years ago. I did election night coverage. So my friends on the panel here remember this on television on election night. And that morning, the New York Times predicted that there was a 92% probability. That was the last, if you will, polling data, 92% probability that Hillary Clinton would win the election. So I think it's a very different scenario that's being painted here. It sounds great to try to frighten people, and this is that somehow this election is over. Far from it. The Biden campaign itself has issued memos saying that they're worried about overconfidence. The election will largely be decided in 4 or 5 states. I think one of the key states is Pennsylvania. I think the vice president hurt himself yesterday on oil, and that's my view, and on the fracking positions in Pennsylvania, a key state. So the election is very tight in those 4 or 5 states that are going to decide the election. And then the other states that are traditionally red and blue, it's pretty much decided. I don't buy that. It's a nice talking point here that Rick has about Kansas in play, but that's just not it. The last thing is, too bad the guest here is not on TV to talk about court packing and the fact that it's been 133 years and it's been tried 60 years ago to try to do this. When it's not going their way, they want to change the rules and have a larger court. Believe me, if it were on the other shoe, it'd be there's nothing rushed about this process. It's absolutely constitutional and it's absolutely appropriate. And note how they don't want to talk about Amy Coney Barrett anymore because she was a stellar candidate for the court, nominee, I should say, and the performance was spectacular. But I hope they bring up court packing.
All right.
I hope they want to change our system. And of course, not tell the American people what they have in mind until they're elected.
Rick, the swing states, Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina, Iowa, Arizona, and Wisconsin, we've seen the many Republicans joining now and spending on those states trying to tilt the ground in favor of Joe Biden. Which of the states you think could be decisive?
Well, look, I'm a Florida guy from the beginning, and Florida is always going to be close. Biden is maintaining a small but meaningful lead there. It's going to be a tight race no matter what. Wisconsin and Michigan seem to have safely drifted out of Trump's orbit and are looking safely Joe Biden at this point. Pennsylvania is similarly moving toward Biden. We're seeing enormous numbers in the collar counties around Philadelphia. Performance is very high there. Ohio will also be close. The swing states are that for a reason. They are swing states. Arizona, which was formerly a Republican state, seems safely out of Trump's grasp. And again, there's a highly competitive atmosphere this year in the state of Texas. More people have voted in Texas this year so far than voted for Trump in 2016. The turnout demographics we're seeing in Texas in the early voting are very favorable for Joe Biden. I'm not saying Texas is going to go blue necessarily. What I am saying is it shouldn't even be a problem. The other thing we've seen is that Donald Trump's campaign is off the air in many of the swing states now. Mm-hmm. They basically still have a comprehensive advertising program only in Florida and North Carolina. They put somebody back into Pennsylvania the last few days, but they've been dark or largely dark for several weeks before that. So there's a lot going on here. You can't analogize this to 2016 for a host of reasons. Most importantly, that Hillary Clinton was a deeply unpopular figure, and Joe Biden is not in the same category in the minds of Republican voters as this sort of demonic 30-year nemesis that they faced. So it's going to be close. We're not arguing it's going to be a landslide at all. We'd like it to be a landslide because we believe Trump and Trumpism are a proximate danger to the country. But, this is a race where Donald Trump should have had $1 billion, a billion with a B. And he's now down to, taking his ads off the air in most of the key swing states. There's something that's gone badly wrong in his campaign, obviously. So we're going to see how it shakes out, obviously, but it's going to be a tight race.
Clark, I see the optimism that has been expressed by Democrats over the last few weeks. At this stage, you seem to be quite confident that 3rd of November is going to be an historic moment for the Americans. Do you have any concerns about voter suppression?
Well, let me address the first part. Having been on the ballot, I never agreed to let our guard down until all the votes have been counted. We've seen this before, and we have an electoral college that makes the decision, not the popular vote. And those crucial states are going to be so important, the swing states. But there's a huge difference between 2020 and 2016. Donald Trump could run as an outsider then, no question about it. Now he is the president of the United States. As Harry Truman said, the buck stops here. And all the things that we've been discussing, he has ultimate responsibility for that. He cannot blame Joe Biden, who has not been in office the last 4 years. It is Donald Trump.
Adolfo, what do you think would happen in the upcoming days before the day of the election? What are the chances for Donald Trump to tilt the ground in his favor?
Well, I actually think it's in his favor. I have a very completely different take. The president has announced a 5-state swing again. He's been on the campaign trail, unlike the other candidate that has been, and I'll use the term the president uses correctly, holed up in his bunker in Delaware, in a basement, and not really going out to them. You know why? Because he can't have crowds of, and they're going to say it's COVID and the rest of it. Bring out 30,000 cards. Okay. But let me just tell you, I think the strategy is going to be on the ground, and it's going to be hitting these states. The swing states. I do think this is an important point for the viewers to hear. Now they're whistling that it's a different tune. In 2016, nobody before the election was saying that Donald Trump was going to win or that she was such a failed candidate. But let me say one last quick thing about Rick. You can't have it both ways. Oh, it's going to be a close election, which it will be. But, we're winning or it's close in Texas and Kansas, and they're out of the air in Wisconsin and so forth. It is going to be a close race. And Donald Trump will win the race, but you can't have it both ways to simply say it's a runaway and then say it's a close race. They want to make it look like it's a runaway election. Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania are very much in play and very much within the president's grasp.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Adolfo Franco, Rick Wilson, Clark Plexico, I really appreciate your contribution, your insight. Thank you. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hashem Ahelbarra, and the entire team here. Bye for now.